What's up, guys? Welcome into the third episode of the TDL podcast. We just finished the Shula Division deep dive in the last video, so we're going to be jumping in and taking a look at the Halas Division in this video. So I'm not going to waste any time. I'm going to go ahead and get started. So before we get into it too much, taking a look at the Halas Division, we'll go back. So the Shula Division, again, is what we reviewed in the last episode. Dan, Jamie, Taylor, Damon. Looking at the results of the polls, and I'll refresh this and see if any more have come in. Looks like we got 9 votes total. So 4 for Dan, 4 for Jamie, 1 for Taylor, and 0 for Damon. So out of the league at the moment, at least out of the 9 guys that voted, not very much confidence in Taylor or Damon winning the division. Pretty split confidence that it will either be Dan or Jamie. So if you're one of the 3 that haven't voted, please go ahead and get your vote in, and we can hopefully kind of break that tie at the top. But looking at the Halas division for this episode, that consists of Miles, Spencer, Tony, and Nolan. So it should be a pretty fun division. Just like the last episode, before we get looking at the teams and stuff like that, let's take a look at who the division is named after. So it's named after legendary coach George Halas, who is the third winningest head coach of all time if you count playoff wins. He has 324 total. He has 6 NFL championships and 8 appearances. So he was before the Super Bowl era. So they were called NFL championships back then. He won 6 of them, lost 2. He coached the Chicago Bears, who technically were the Decatur Staleys for like the first year or two, and then became the Chicago Bears. He coached them for 40 seasons. He was with the organization for, it looks like, 63 years. So he had a very unique position. He was player from 1920 in their inception. He was player, coach, executive, manager, head of ticket sales, promoter. He was pretty much everything for the franchise. And so that's how he earned his nickname, which is Mr. Everything. I wrote down here, he popularized public address systems, radio broadcasts. I believe they were the first team to have their games broadcasted on the radio. He also was a very popular figure in forming the T formation, which dominated the NFL for a long time. In the 1940 NFL championship, they earned a decisive 73 to nothing victory over Washington, actually. Shout out, Dan. And that's kind of what put everybody on notice and got everybody trying to copy the Halas system from there. So that's where the T formation became so popular. He played for the team for 9 seasons. He played wide receiver and defensive end. And he also, which I did not know this, played in 12 MLB games for the New York Yankees as well. So the nickname Mr. Everything is extremely fitting because just from, doing 20 minutes of research on the guy, I mean, it's very obvious that he um, literally did everything. Like, that's not an exaggeration. So he's a member of the Hall of Fame as well. Very, very legendary coach. Again, that's kind of the theme. It's the 3 winningest head coaches, at least at the moment, that the divisions are named after. So Miles, Spencer, Tony, and Nolan, you're representing a legendary coach. And so you should be very proud, again, to play in the division and hopefully, for one of you, win it this year. So now let's get into kind of taking a look the same way that we did in the last video. So I'll just go in order here. Again, I'll kind of just speed through the rosters and then we'll go over to keep trade cut and we'll kind of do more of an in-depth breakdown on each position. So Nolan, he's rocking 3 quarterbacks, Lamar Jackson, who he drafted at the 102, 103, somewhere in there. Yeah, I think it was 102. Lamar Jackson, Drake May, his own guy there, Spencer Rattler. Running back room consists of 6 guys: Devon Achane, Tyrone Tracy, Jaleel McLaughlin, Kamani Vidal, again, his own guy, Travion Henderson, and Zach Charbonnet. Wide receiver room is pretty deep for 8, 9 guys: Brian Thomas, Jordan Addison, Jamison Williams, Michael Wilson, Cedric Tillman, Leggett, Myers, Dobbs, and Boutte from New England. Tight end room is three deep: Hawkinson, Andrews, and Sanders. Moving on to, looks like it will be Spencer. He's got a four-man quarterback room. Jalen Hurts, the newly acquired Joe Burrow, Joe Milton, and Quinn Ewers. Running back room: Pacheco, James Cook, Sutton, Monangai, if that's how you pronounce that, Rashad White, Brian Robinson, Keaton Mitchell. Wide receiver room: Puka, Ladd, Shakir, Devontae Smith, Christian Kirk, Hollywood Brown, Rashad Bateman. And a tight end room consisting of Kyle Pitts and Dalton Schultz, and then the rookie Harold Fannin. What do we got? Tony and Miles. Tony has got his own guy, Mahomes, CJ Stroud, a really strong 1-2 punch there. Kirk Cousins and Tua as well round out the room. Running backs: Kyron, Chase Brown, James Conner. I don't guess I even know who this is. Rashard Smith, Ramondre Stevenson, Jerome Ford, Jordan Mason. Wide receivers: Marv, Waddle, Worthy, Roman Wilson, Keon Coleman, Michael Pittman, Christian Watson, Tank Dell. Four-man tight end room: Jake Ferguson, Zach Ertz, Hunter Henry, Cade Otton. And then last but not least, Miles. He's got Caleb Williams, J.J. McCarthy, Geno Smith. Very strong running back duo here: Jahmyr Gibbs, Ashton Jeanty, along with Trey Benson, Isaac Guerrero, Zach Moss. Receiver: he's got Rashee Rice, Roma Dunze, Godwin, DK, Ayamanor, Trey Harris, Restrepo, Amari Cooper, Juwan Jennings, Darnell Mooney, Demario Douglas. And then two tight ends: Colston Loveland and is that Terrence Ferguson? From the Rams. So that is the rosters that make up the Halas division. Before we even jump in, I can already tell that I think all of these teams seem strong, at least on paper. Just from kind of reading off the names, I really, in my mind, didn't notice any weaknesses anywhere. Seems like it's going to be a very competitive division to me. But let's take a little bit more of a deep dive. So I need to learn everybody's name yet. Actually, let's resync in case anything changed. Okay, so we've got your thoughts. Rank them below. Okay, we'll keep Rashad Bateman. We'll trade Shaheed. We'll cut Jalen Wright. So there you go. The eternal rebuild, that is Nolan. He is ranked as the fourth best team in the league at the moment. They're giving him the number 2 quarterback room, which, it's a very strong duo at the top: Lamar Jackson, Drake May. Should be guys, again, that I think will score a lot of points this year. Obviously, Lamar has been great. He's coming off a fantastic year. Drake May looked really solid as a rookie. Just kind of looking at some of his game logs when he did get to play, scored 28, 25, 12, 20, 14, 22, 15, 22, 19, 22, and 12. So very solid for a rookie quarterback, especially coming in the middle of the year and kind of a shit show in New England. Not much talent. They've had a pretty big offseason. They brought in Stephon Diggs, Henderson as well to run the ball. So I expect him to take a big leap in year 2. Spencer Rattler's got a chance to start New Orleans, I feel like. This is from a few weeks ago. Says he took the majority of first-team reps at OTAs, obviously with Derek Carr, with the kind of surprise retirement. Similar to what I said about Anthony Richardson, Daniel Jones, you would probably be accurate if you predicted Spencer Rattler to at least start a couple games this season for New Orleans, but potentially has a chance to start a lot. So pretty strong quarterback room overall, a great duo, and then another guy who potentially could contribute. Fifth best running back room. So going back and looking, Devon Achane, obviously a strong piece coming off a great year. Tyrone Tracy is kind of a polarizing one in the dynasty world. A lot of people are pro Scatabo. A lot of people are pro Tracy. Just kind of looking on Twitter and some places that I look at stuff, that's one of the most kind of split worlds in dynasty fantasy football at the moment. I think Tyrone Tracy looked awesome and had a really strong year. He wasn't a full-time player the entire year, really. Just kind of looking here until about week 5 before he became a full-time player, but he still ended up with 839 and 5 on the ground, as well as 38 and 1. I'm sorry, 38 for 284 and 1 through the air. So a talented receiver, kind of a receiver converted running back. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Jaleel McLaughlin, he gets a little run in Denver. Vidal a little bit, but stronger pieces here in Travion Henderson. Who New England brought in. It's not going to show me his. Obviously, he doesn't have much of a game log, but obviously he's brought in. He's got Ramondre Stevenson, still kind of in the mix, but they drafted him in the second round and they did it for a reason. So seems like he's a committee guy at worst, who, if he's as advertised, could take on an extremely strong role down the stretch. And then Zach Charbonnet, it's kind of the same situation with him. He's talented. He looks good when he gets to play. But Kenneth Walker is obviously extremely talented. Health is really the main issue for him. Seems like he's always playing banged up or will miss a couple of games. But Charbonnet is probably you'd consider him maybe the top handcuff in fantasy football, because he's a guy who does have a role every game, but then he can have some monster games when it's just him playing, especially down the stretch. He had that monster 38-point performance at Arizona. So good running back room, seems rightfully rated as top 5. Wide receiver room, they rank 7th. So he's rocking with Brian Thomas, obviously a very strong rookie season. They brought in Liam Cohen. The only downside, I guess, would be that they also brought in Travis Hunter. But, it still kind of remains to be seen what exactly his role will be. He's a rookie. It may take him, a little while to adjust. But I think Brian Thomas looks like a monster. Jordan Addison, really strong player. He still got his DUI trial kind of upcoming. Not entirely sure what's going to happen with that. But his first 2 years in the league have been strong. He's finished 21 and 20 in half PPR, 70 for 911 and 10 as a rookie in 17 games, and then only 15 games last year, but had 63 for 875 and 9. So, he's a guy that would probably be in contention to be a 1 on some other teams, but for him, he's behind Justin Jefferson, which has its pluses and its minuses. So if he has a connection with rookie quarterback JJ McCarthy, he's going to be just fine. Jameson Williams, coming off an awesome year, figures to be even more involved. Jacoby Myers is kind of an underrated guy to roster in fantasy football, but he's super steady. Had 1,000 yards last year. He's a chain mover. He catches a lot of passes. Is he going to break again? Is he going to break fantasy football? Probably not. But he's going to have a big role. And if he stays healthy, he should catch 75, 80 balls for around 1,000 yards and get in the end zone a few times. Xavier Legette, a young player entering his second year in the league. Decent rookie season, 49 for 497 and 4. Could potentially be looking to kind of take a leap this year, especially with how Bryce Young played down the stretch last year. Looked like he figured some stuff out. Dobbs, you guys know my thoughts on Dobbs. I think he sucks, but there's the yearly report that he is looking like he has a super strong connection with Jordan Love in camp. Whoa, that's crazy. But no, I mean, he's a solid player. You can flex him, and he can be just fine. And then some more depth pieces to go along as well. Cedric Tillman looked awesome for a stretch last year. I'm not sure how involved he'll be this year. I know Judy kind of emerged as the clear 1 there, but if they get somebody that can throw the ball, Tillman's definitely talented. Tight end room is rated 7th in the league. TJ Hawkinson, Mark Andrews, and then Jatavian Sanders, had a decent rookie season last year. Again, kind of similar to what I just said about Legette. If Bryce Young continues to look solid, then he could carve out a decent role there, because they don't really have anybody else at the tight end room. Mark Andrews, he's kind of polarizing. He's kind of old. He's not that old though, but he's into the latter half of his career, I would say. really strange season last year. He was awful at the start of the year and very uninvolved in the offense overall. My estimation on that is we overestimated how quickly he would return back to form from the car crash situation. Coming off the broken leg from the year before. Now there's talks here that he could potentially be moved. I don't really think that's going to happen, but it sounds like he had a terrible season. He ended up tight end five in half PPR. Very, very touchdown dependent. Only had 55 for 673, but got in the end zone 11 times, and a ton of those were down the stretch. He scored in their last 6 games, and he scored in 7 out of 8 down the stretch. So obviously had a very unfortunate drop in the playoffs, but we don't have to talk about that right now. But in my opinion, Mark Andrews is still a top five-ish tight end in Dynasty. Likely is going to have more of a role. They'll use them both. But I don't see Mark Andrews' red zone role going away, and he's still a reliable target, especially hopefully coming into the season at full strength. And then similar for Hawkinson, missed most of the year due to injury. Or I guess he played in 10 games, but seemed like it was a while before he obviously looked somewhat like his old self. But kind of got going down the stretch, got a lot more involved in the offense. Um, he's an absolutely amazing tight end. He had 3 top 5 finishes in his previous 4 seasons before getting injured with, at the end of that year, at the end of 2023. So again, just like I said about Jordan Addison, if he's got a connection with McCarthy and McCarthy is as advertised, Hawkinson will be a great tight end, in my opinion. So I kind of view his tight end room probably a little bit higher than 7, or I'm sorry, they got him 5. Yeah, that's maybe about accurate, but overall, I think it's a very strong tight end room. And with this league being tight end premium, having a few really solid options that could emerge as top 5-ish tight ends this season, that's a strong weapon to have. To give him the 5th overall picks, I believe he's just got his normal lineup of picks: 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So hasn't really made moves yet, but has his full draft capital to make a move there. So solid roster. Moving down one spot below him at number 5 is Miles. He's given the eighth best quarterback room. Caleb Williams, J.J. McCarthy, Geno Smith. That's a solid room, in my opinion. I think it's 3 starters for this year and at least another year or so to come after that. I know Geno's kind of getting up there in age, but didn't play as much throughout a lot of his career either, so doesn't quite have the wear and tear that some other 34? Yeah, 34-year-olds have. I think he's just going to be a just fine option for fantasy. He moves a little bit, coming off 2 pretty solid seasons. I know it's 3 solid seasons. Obviously the breakout year in Seattle, 4,200 yards, 30 touchdowns, but has followed it up with 3,620 and 9, and then 4,321 and 15. So he's a very, very solid QB3, in my opinion, behind 2 guys that could potentially be, awesome. I mean, these could be guys that we could be scratching our heads in a year or 2 wondering how he acquired them so cheap in the draft, especially J.J. McCarthy. Missed all of last year, looked really good in the preseason, but then missed all of last year after the knee surgery. But there's all these reports that, he's been basically in the lab doing the VR stuff, getting a lot of reps. Obviously, a very talented team. They're going to have a great defense, a bunch of weapons on offense, a genius mastermind, a head coach calling plays. I think the situation is set up for McCarthy to be at least serviceable, unless he just absolutely sucks. So I'm excited to see him. I was hoping to draft McCarthy, so I was kind of jealous on that one. And then Caleb Williams, kind of advertised as this generational number 1 talent. Supposedly coming into, I'm one of the people that bought into the narrative that it was the best situation for any rookie quarterback ever. It definitely didn't seem that way. I know some of it's on Caleb, some of it's probably on the guys on the roster underperforming. But they've brought in Ben Johnson. They've brought in a bunch of offensive line help. They've drafted another receiver for him. And so, I think he's in a position where it would be hard for him to have a terrible season. And from a fantasy perspective, it's not like he was awful. 3,500 yards, 20 touchdowns, 6 picks, and then he added 489 yards on the ground. He was decent for fantasy, wasn't as advertised. But if things pan out the way they look like they might, then he seems like he vaults into the top 10 quarterbacks this season pretty easily. So, um, I keep saying, I'm like, oh, well, I don't agree with that ranking. Well, I mean, I'm not sitting here ranking them. I mean, Preston mentioned this to me the other night, actually. Like, somebody's got to be 1, somebody's got to be 12, as well as everything in between. So maybe it's accurate, but 8 seems a little conservative, in my opinion. Number 1, running back room, obviously spearheaded by Jahmyr Gibbs and Ashton Jeanty, 2 spectacular options. Obviously, Gibbs has been awesome, projects to continue to be awesome. Jeanty was drafted, what was he, number 6 overall? He figures to come in. It basically has no competition at the running back room, in my opinion. Figures to be a rare workhorse back in the league. Are they going to be a great team? Are they going to be a great offense? I'm not really sure, but I think he's going to touch the ball enough that he will probably have a decent return on investment. Rest of his room is obviously quite a bit weaker. Trey Benson, a lot of people expected him to have more of a role last year. James Conner just continues to kind of turn back the clock and look awesome, but it seems like Trey Benson, if he's as talented as a lot of people think he is seemingly the heir apparent there in Arizona and might carve out more of a role in year 2. Isaac Guerendo got to play a little bit with all the injuries that they had last year. It's good to see that he, as it says here, is on the field for OTAs because he did sustain some injuries down the stretch there. Right now projects as the number 2 running back. They got rid of Jordan Mason. So, could be an extremely valuable handicap, an extremely valuable handcuff behind handicap Christian McCaffrey. Or McCaffrey could stay upright and have the greatest running back season of all time. I mean, it feels like that's pretty much the 2 options, but a really, really solid handcuff to have. Who can save you down the stretch, provide that boost if something happens, or he could be a solid trade piece as well if CMC is going to miss a few weeks. Zach Moss, I don't know exactly what his role is in Cincinnati. He was brought in. It seemed like they brought him in and wanted him to carve out a big role, and he was decent early in the season. Then he got hurt, and Chase Brown looked awesome, and there wasn't much need for him. They drafted Taj Brooks. They brought back Samaje Perine, Chase Brown, figures to be the clear number 1. So not entirely sure what Zach Moss's role is there. But he's given the number 1 running back room. That could be controversial because we talked about some strong running back rooms in the last episode with Dan, obviously, and then also with Damon. I think you could argue both of those could be the number 1 running back room as well, plus potentially some others that we get into. Jamie had a really strong running back room as well. So, we'll see. Wide receiver room ranked 6th, led by Rashee Rice. Probably slid down the board further than he should have. I know there's a lot of questions regarding his health with his kind of freak knee injury last year, regarding a potential suspension. There's a lot up in the air. Seems like a really good bet to make. All signs point towards him being a lot healthier looking at this point in the year than he was expected to be. Seems like he might not get suspended since he's a Chief. And, they get all the special favors. Not really sure. But whether he's super healthy and gets to play all the games this year or whether he misses a couple, whatever the deal is, he's Mahomes' right-hand man. So he's a great guy to hold in Dynasty. Odunze had a decent rookie season. What was he, the number 9 pick last year in the draft? He had a pretty solid rookie season. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't glamorous at any point, but it was solid, especially with how rough their offense was. 54 for 734 and 3 is really not all that bad. Their offense seems like it's poised, like I said, with Caleb to take a step forward. They did bring in Luther Burden. DJ Moore didn't look very good last year. So it's really tough to figure out how that receiver room is going to shake out. But there's a chance he could be in contention to be the top option on a great offense, or he could be the number 3 option in kind of a mid offense. So we'll see. But he at least appears to be a talented player in the league that should see the ball fairly often. Chris Godwin, man, rest in peace, Chris Godwin. Tough situation what happened with him last year. I heard only good things about his rehab from his previous knee injury. He had a decent year in 2023. Then he comes back last year and is just basically a world beater. I want to say he was the number 1 receiver in fantasy football. I don't remember if it was exactly when he went down or if it was before that, but he was a top 2 or 3 guy in fantasy football last year. Goes down late in the game, a game that they're not even in. It sucked. It was unfortunate, but they say he's got a chance to be ready for week 1. I know they did bring in Emeka Egbuka, who we talked about in the last episode. Jalen McMillan's solid. Mike Evans, obviously, is still a guy. Godwin's getting a little up there in age, but his style of play seems to me like it. He could be successful later into his career because he's not a guy that requires so much physicality or athleticism to make his game work. So we'll see what kind of health situation he's in, because if he's fully healthy and Egbuka doesn't, impress a lot, then he's going to be a guy that he's going to be a 1A, 1B in what should be a great offense that throws the ball a lot. So, kind of looking at that, Juwan Jennings is another name that jumps out to me. Oh, DK Metcalf, I skipped right over him. Obviously goes to Pittsburgh this year. They just signed Aaron Rodgers. So if anything, I think Aaron Rodgers will force feed him the ball if they have chemistry. Debo is obviously very big, very physical, very fast, very talented. It's never fully panned out for him where he's been like a dominant number 1 wide receiver. Just hasn't probably quite seen the volume that he's needed to see, especially in the short and intermediate area. But he's a red zone monster. He's a down the field monster, and I think Rodgers will feed him the ball, and he'll have a very strong season. Still kind of a murky long term outlook in Dynasty, but he's talented enough that I think he'll be okay. Juwan Jennings, Darnell Mooney are names that jump out to me. Juwan could potentially be the number 1 in San Francisco for some or all of this year. Kind of depends what goes on with Brandon Ayuk, what exactly his status is. They've got McCaffrey, they've got Kittle, guys that have dealt with injuries in the past. So there's a lot of factors at play there. But it seems like he'll at least be a everyday, regular piece in what should be a better offense than they had last year. Darnell Mooney, very strong season last year. Kind of out of the blue, wasn't expected. He had 1,000 yards in 2021, but he hadn't broke 500 since then. But then this past year, he catches 64 balls for 992 yards and 5 touchdowns. They brought in Michael Penix towards the end of the year. Penix looked really strong. It seems like their offense is going to be good. Seems like Mooney will still be the number 2 just behind Drake London. They're going to run the ball a ton with Bijan and Algier, obviously, but a very, very solid option. And then some more depth pieces with Demario Douglas. Trey Harris is an interesting one, rookie, drafted in the 2nd round for the Chargers. So it'll be kind of interesting to see what his role ends up being there. So that'll be something to monitor, but seems like a solid young player. Rookie Restrepo for the Titans, he was undrafted, probably doesn't move the needle a ton, but their wide receiver room's kind of murky looking, so there's a chance to kind of vault up the ladder there. So overall, a solid Did I skip over him too? Yeah, okay. That's the one I was thinking I was clicking on. Fourth round pick there as well for Tennessee. So a couple young guys for Tennessee. If one of them happens to emerge, Miles has got something there. So then his tight end room is ranked eighth. Um, Probably because he only has two. Obviously, Colston Loveland is a. I didn't even mention him when talking about Caleb Williams earlier. Um, is a very enticing guy to own in a super flex dynasty league. Coming back from shoulder surgery, just looking at this report here, it looks like he's been involved, but he's been in a non-contact jersey during mini camp. Not sure if he'll be a full go at the start of training camp. So injury could be a potential issue there, but seems like going forward that'll be a monster piece to have for dynasty. And then Terrence Ferguson, rookie for the Rams. He was taking number 46 overall. Tyler Higbee is solid, but he's starting to get a little bit older. So Cooper Kupp's gone. I know they brought in Devontae Adams, but it seems like there's some targets up for grabs. And if him and Stafford have a connection, could be solid. So rookie tight end room there for Miles seems like good pieces to hold overall for the long term, but maybe kind of lacking in the now department is why he's ranked slightly lower. Draft picks, they rank him eighth. He's got, let's see, what's he missing? He's got a 1 and a 2 this year for 26. He's got 1, 2, 3, and 27, and 1, 2, 3, and 28. So he lost a third round pick. I want to say in a trade he made, was it with Bo? I can't really remember. That's usually a good guess. Bo makes a lot of trades, but similar to Nolan, pretty much has a full boat of picks to be able to do whatever he pleases with. Who else are we looking for here? Spencer and Tony. So Spencer, with his new name that I'm also not going to say on the internet, he's ranked eighth overall, but an extremely strong quarterback room. He's given the number 3 overall quarterback room. Like I said, he acquired Joe Burrow in a trade from Bo. Joe Burrow, that guy's been passed around like crazy so far. But Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow, very, very strong argument for the best quarterback duo in the league. I think maybe you'd get some pushback from Tony, who we're going to talk about next. And then Joe Milton, Quinn Ewers, guys that aren't going to factor in immediately, but guys that could factor in the future. But man, Jalen Hurts, is extremely strong quarterback to have, especially in a super flex league. The only downside is, this league is 6-point passing touchdown, which is kind of rare for super flex leagues. So guys that throw a lot of touchdowns, it kind of provides a little bit more balance for them because usually you see the runners score a lot more points. Obviously, Jalen scores a lot of his points. Jalen Hurts displays dominance in Super Bowl victory. I love to read that. Obviously, he's a guy that scores a lot of his touchdowns on the ground. 23 is the most touchdowns he's thrown for in a year, but he's a guy that's going to run for double-digit touchdowns every season. So just kind of nitpicking on him just a tad. With maybe he's not quite as powerful of an option as guys like Joe Burrow, for example, who are going to throw a ton of touchdowns. Through 43 last year, his other 2 full seasons he's played, he's thrown 34 and 36, and he moves around on the ground just enough too. So man, an elite 1-2 punch there at quarterback, regardless of where they have his overall team ranked, regardless of um, where he's weaker potentially at other positions, stuff like that. You got Hurts and Burrow in your lineup in a super flex league. They could rattle off. You probably expect them to score between 40 to 50-ish every week. And they're guys that, they could get hot and score 70 or 80 in a week and potentially win you the game by themselves. So both young, 26 and 20, what's Burrow, 28? He's pretty much set up for life there, it seems like. So very, very strong 1-2 punch. I would probably argue that he has the number one quarterback room and not the number three. They've got Dan ranked as one with Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix. I mean, I would take Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow probably over those two. Um, but, maybe Dan's got a little bit more of a shot at his number three being something than Spencer. So maybe that's where the caveat's coming from. But Spencer, Tony, Dan, those are you could make the argument they all have the number one quarterback room. Extremely strong, in my opinion. We talked about Nolan earlier as well. So um he's got the number nine running back room. We were actually talking earlier today, and he was talking about how he thinks his running back room is a little bit weak. James Cook, kind of some strange stuff going on, but he's coming off an absolutely monster season in Buffalo. Not much appears to have changed, in my opinion, with that offense. So if he's there and he's happy and he's playing and he's healthy, he should have a monster year. There's been kind of some reports that may be involved in he wants a new contract, he wants to be traded. Um, but he did report to minicamp, and hopefully they figure that out. He's a talented player. Pacheco has been solid, obviously coming back from the leg injury that he suffered in the middle of the season. It was not his best overall year, but assuming he's 100% healthy and ready to go, he should play a big role in a pretty solid offense. They did bring in Elijah Mitchell and that Brashard Smith, but Kareem Hunt's old. They like him, they trust him, but as long as Pacheco's healthy, he should be the guy there. Um, let's see, Rashad White and Brian Robinson, pretty solid options. Brian Robinson, you kind of know what you're getting from him. He's gonna run the ball a lot. He's probably gonna run it somewhat inefficiently, but he is going to be a threat to score a lot of touchdowns. He was utilized more as a receiver last year than it seemed like he would be. Shout out to Dan, who actually called that. Austin Eckler's still around. He's getting older, but he's really reliable in the pass game. So a very solid kind of number three, number four option. Similar with Rashad White. You go back and look at his stats because you just think about how awesome Bucky Irving was last year. You kind of forget about Rashad White. If you go look at his stats, he had 613 and 3 on the ground, as well as 51 for 393 and 6 through the year. So he was 1,000-yard, 9-touchdown guy last season. I mean, he's just fine. They throw the ball a lot, and they like to rotate those running backs in. So, he's also going into what's probably going to be his final season with Tampa. So maybe they kind of run the tread off of his tires a little bit more. He's a solid flex option. You could play him as your running back too if you had to, depending on the matchup. But I think that's a good core group of 4 running backs there. And then some guy like Bashal Tutin, I know there's a lot of drumbeat around him, especially with how bad Travis Etienne was last year. Maybe he carves out a bit of a role. Keaton Mitchell's a guy that looked awesome 2 years ago, had that terrible knee injury. And then obviously Derrick Henry comes in and steals the show. But long term, there could be something there as well. So I think it's a better running back room than KTC and Spencer both would say it is. But I do understand it being comparatively weaker to his other positions. Wide receiver room's top 5. Very solid, spearheaded by Puka, obviously, and Lad McConkey, who had an unbelievable rookie season last year. Those project to be top options going forward. Devontae Smith is always a solid option. He is on the trade block, I should add. So if you're interested in Devontae Smith, hit up Spencer. Khalil Shakir coming off a career year. Wasn't great. It was a career year for him. It was 100 targets, which is more than double what he'd ever had. Caught 76 for 821 and 4. Signs a big extension, 4 years, 60 mil, 32 guaranteed. They don't really bring anybody in. So unless Dalton Kincaid and or Keon Coleman take like a huge step forward, I guess they did bring in Josh Palmer. But unless one of those guys takes a big step forward, it seems like Shakir is in line to pretty much be exactly what he was last year. So, when you're talking about him as your number 4 option in your receiver room, you're pretty pleased. Let's see. Rashad Bateman is a very interesting one. He just signed an extension. He had a good season. He finally was able to stay healthy. Caught 45 balls, which is the most he'd caught since his rookie year. It was a career high in targets, career high in yards, career high in touchdowns. Again, they didn't really, to my knowledge, bring anybody in that should offer much pushback. Is he ever going to be like a dominant guy? No, because they still have Zay Flowers. They run the ball a ton with Henry and Lamar. They like to throw to their tight ends. So, I mean, he may be relied on scoring touchdowns a little more than you'd like this past year, but if he's able to stay healthy, I don't see why he can't build off that as well. And then Christian Kirk is solid. I'm not sure what kind of role he'll have there. Hollywood Brown's also on the trade block. Unfortunate kind of for him how he had to miss most of the year last year with that shoulder kind of injury or collarbone, clavicle, whatever it was. He did not play until week 16. He looked okay, but as long as he comes in 100% healthy, it is kind of a crowded room all of a sudden with Rashee Rice and then Xavier Worthy emerging down the stretch. But Hollywood Brown's talented enough, fast enough, he can have some big weeks. So I think that's a very good wide receiver room. Tight end room is ranked bottom 3. It's 10th. Kyle Pitts, Dalton Schultz, and Harold Fannin. Probably rightfully so. Kyle Pitts is such a weird figure in Dynasty where he was expected to be this game breaker. He's basically was expected to be what Brock Bowers was last year. Didn't really pan out. Still has continued to not pan out. Physical ailments has been a bit of a concern. He got hurt in the 22 season, and I think it impacted him for much of the 2023 season, in my opinion. And then it kind of talks about it in here, but he had some foot injuries last year. So he's a guy that has just never really matched up with him being healthy and having a solid quarterback, really any of that stuff. But he's still a decent guy to own. He's still only 24. You have to imagine if he comes back healthy and Michael Penix is as advertised and that offense gets humming a little bit like it was towards the end of the year, is he going to vault to what he should have been or was expected to be? No. But could he become pretty clearly a top 10 tight end option? I don't see why not. So a lot of good stuff about Harold Fannin. He's a rookie for Cleveland. He was a 3rd-round draft pick. Just kind of looking at his stats here out of Bowling Green, he had 117 catches for 1,500 yards and 10 touchdowns in his final season. So they do have David Njoku, obviously, but Njoku, he's getting up there in 28. It's not old. Njoku's a really, really good player, in my opinion. He's solid year in and year out, but he's a guy that's dealt with injuries from time to time. They don't really have much going in their wide receiver room. Judy looked unbelievable down the stretch. Tillman had some flashes, but other than that, they don't have a lot of options. So it seems reasonable that they could run a lot of 2 tight end sets if this guy is as advertised. And, he could carve out a little bit more of a role the next year or two. And then, maybe Njoku's gone and Fannin kind of leapfrogs and is solid. So remains to be seen. It's hard to discuss the rookies because there's so many possibilities. Dalton Schultz is fine. He's not a game breaker, but he's a guy you can plug and play and hope for 7 or 8 points. Some weeks he's had obviously much stronger seasons. This past year was a drop off from what he'd done previously. There had been a lot of mouths to feed in the offense, at least presumably at the start of last year. Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Stephon Diggs was there last year. So, Tank Dell has had some really unfortunate stuff happen to him physically. I'm not sure what his career is going to be. They brought in Jaden Higgins in the 2nd round. Nico's obviously still a stud, but there's room for somebody to step up on this offense. Their offensive line might be a little better, but it's probably going to be pretty bad again. So maybe they lean on him just a little bit more. So a weaker tight end room overall, I do agree, but pretty solid. Draft pick situation, they've got him 11th, presumably due to the Joe Burrow trade. So he's actually got a full boat of picks this year. He owns Tony's 2nd-round pick. 27, he doesn't have a 1 or a 2, and then 28, he's got everything. So all things considered, for acquiring a stud quarterback like Burrow and to still have relatively decent draft capital, I mean, you've got a full set of picks in 20, 26 and 28. I think that's extremely well done. So, man, this division looks strong. I know I've been pretty positive, but just looking at all the teams so far, seems like I mentioned on the last episode, kind of what you want in Dynasty. You got a kind of a core set of guys. You've got some vets, you've got some young guys, you've got kind of some projects that you're going to hope to pay off, and then you've got picks to be able to be flexible. So this division's in really good shape so far. Last but not least, the MAGA machine, Mr. Tony Harris. He's ranked number 11. I already kind of talked about his quarterback room earlier, but Patrick Mahomes, CJ Stroud potentially is the best 1-2 punch in the league. Mahomes hasn't been in fantasy the last few years what he was before. Obviously, his first year that he played, he goes quarterback 1, 7, 4, 4, 1. In the last 2 years, it's been 8 and then 11. So, defenses have adjusted to him throwing the deep ball a little bit. There's actually, if you look at some of the numbers, he's thrown a bad deep ball the last couple of years anyways. Kelsey's getting older. They've not had, they lose Tyreek Hill and they've kind of had trouble replacing him. Seemed like they had him replaced with Rice and then, he got hurt. He runs a little bit. He's a fine option. I mean, he's a guy who could have a top 5 season again, and it wouldn't surprise anybody, or he could have kind of something in that 8 to 12 range and it wouldn't surprise me either. But a strong guy to have is your one. And then CJ Stroud, already kind of talked about him. Unbelievable rookie season, 4,100 yards, 23 touchdowns, 5 picks, kind of out of nowhere. Wasn't expected to be that good. And then regresses last year, but the line was terrible. Diggs got hurt. Nico got hurt. Tank Dell got hurt. And it was, pretty much a nightmare for a quarterback, in my opinion. But still, for fantasy, carved out a decent year. Like I said, their line is probably still not going to be great. But I think overall their offense should be better. It just kind of remains to be seen how much better. Health is going to be such a big factor there. But what Tony has that some of these other guys don't is, in my opinion, a great QB3, and that's Tua Tagovailoa. Obviously, concerns with the concussion stuff. Had a really ugly one last year, and basically everybody called for him to retire. And Tua came back and was really, really good. Just looking at his box score, 17 points, 22 points, 10, and then 30, 37, 30, 28. A great stretch there. Last 2 weeks weren't very good, 5 and 14. But, I mean, the story is pretty much the same. If he's on the field, he's going to produce. He's very accurate thrower of the football. They are an innovative offense when everybody is healthy and a full go. Tyreek's aging. He's probably not the dominant wide receiver one. He once was. Jalen Waddle has some health concerns. Jonnu Smith, already talked about him in the last episode, coming off a great year. And then Devon Achane's a great option at running back. So, health permitting, he's a guy he's, in my opinion, I would say the best QB3 in this entire league. And, has a chance to be probably the 2 on this team. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me at all if he stayed upright for 17 games if he outperformed Stroud or Mahomes. So Kirk Cousins, we kind of know the situation with him, but a great quarterback room, in my opinion. 5 is a terrible ranking. 7 ranked running back room. Let's see. We got Kyren Williams, Chase Brown. That's a great 1-2 punch to kind of start the running back room there with. Youth, pass production, both coming off really good years. Guys that are in good offenses, guys that they trust to get the ball in the end zone, guys that don't really have any competition behind them. So really strong. Chase Brown, I've said it before, I think he had one of the best off seasons in the league. And what I mean by that is they didn't bring in, it would not have been that surprising if they took a running back in like the 2nd or 3rd round, or they signed kind of a bruiser to come in and split time with them. They really didn't add anybody all that significant. So, and similar with Kyren Williams, they drafted a dude in the 4th round, Jarquez Hunter, but unless Corum takes a step forward, I know there's talks that McVay, likes the Liam Cohen style offense and that kind of stuff. So maybe Kyren doesn't see like 80-something% of the touches or whatever the hell he had last year, but I don't think it's ever going to drop to a committee. They just may look to get other guys a bit more involved, but Kyren's who they trust, and he's a touchdown scoring machine. So, he scored 15 as a rookie and 16 this past year. So, great 1-2 punch there. James Conner, downside for Dynasty is that he's quote unquote old, but he's awesome, dude. I mean, last year he was a beast. Running back 10 finish. He stayed healthy. He played 16 games, which is the most he's ever played in his career. 1,008 on the ground, as well as 47 for 414 and one more through the air. So as long as he stays healthy and as long as he doesn't start to regress due to injury, I think he's fine. I talked about Trey Benson a little bit earlier. Maybe they phase him in slightly more, but in my opinion, it's James Conner's backfield until it's not. So really strong 1, 2, 3 there at running back. Jordan Mason, maybe he has a little bit of a role with Minnesota. I'm not sure. Jerome Ford, he's probably not going to be much in Cleveland with him bringing in both Judkins and Dylan Sampson, but he's a guy that they trust and has played well the past couple years. So I don't think he'll be entirely phased out. I lost my place here. Here we go. Ramondre Stevenson. They bring in Travion Henderson, obviously, but Stevenson's not going away. I'm a bigger Ramondre fan than most other people. He's not going to immediately be phased out there. He will have a role. He should still catch some passes, and I think he'll be okay. But I'm speaking comparatively for like a running back 3 or 4, which is what he is for Tony's team. Wide receiver room is rated 9th out of 12. It is led by Marvin Harrison, Jalen Waddle, and Xavier Worthy. Marvin Harrison, if this was last year, if this was June 19th of 2024, he would have probably took Marvin Harrison in the first round. And, we'd be talking like he has a potential Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase type, CeeDee Lamb type guy on his team. So many receivers last year. McConkey, Neighbors, Brian Thomas had such strong rookie seasons that his 62 for 885 and 8 kind of gets overshadowed, understandably. And then obviously Brock Bowers as well. Unfortunate voice crack there. It's kind of weird. Usually you would think that a guy coming back in with the same coach, same play caller, same quarterback, for a young pass catcher, you would say that's good. Maybe it's not, because I do think possibly the play calling last year was probably a bigger factor for why he struggled. Just didn't really seem like they were making him a priority. He seemed like, just watching, seemed like he ran up the sideline a ton, running like deep, goes and comebacks and curls and stuff like that. So I still think he's so talented. I think he looked talented. It's a decent rookie season. Again, when you're advertised as generational and you have that kind of season, you're going to catch some flack. But I hope he gets more involved this year. He's a fun player to watch, and I hope that pans out. Jalen Waddle, already talked about him a little bit. He's had a solid career. When he's on the field, he catches a lot of passes. He's dynamic. He's explosive. He's just got to stay healthy. But he's still so young. He's only 26. Tyreek's kind of aging. A potential for Jalen Waddle to take probably the biggest step of his career this year. Xavier Worthy, with Rashee Rice going down, stepped up big time for Kansas City last year. Scored a bunch of garbage time points in the Super Bowl when they were getting their ass kicked. But again, figures to be a top 2 option for Patrick Mahomes and an Andy Reid offense. So with potential game-breaking speed. So, you can't really beat that. Michael Pittman's kind of a polarizing option in the dynasty world these days. He's a guy that, he's an Iron Man. He seems like he is always hurt, but he always plays. He's a target hog the last 4 years. Obviously, anywhere from 111 to 156 targets. Is it an offense where he's going to be playing with a great quarterback and an offense that's probably going to score a ton of points? No, but is he an able-bodied, reliable guy that if he stays somewhat healthy and they have decent quarterback play, is he better than wherever Tony drafted him? And, the 1205, yes. I mean, he's a guy that, in my opinion, is too good to be drafted there, but it's just kind of he's a product of his environment and is kind of punished for that. So a very solid, what is he, wide receiver 4 on this team. You can't ask for much better than that. Tank Dell, talked about him already. Christian Watson, he'll have a few big weeks. He's going to hurt his hamstring or something for a while. Maybe he takes a step. He is really talented. He's just got to be able to stay on the field, which he's not done a great job of so far. Keon Coleman, maybe he takes a step forward. Roman Wilson, he's going into his second year. Did not do anything this past year. He obviously dealt with some injuries, but just kind of looking at their depth chart here, obviously they bring in DK. Outside that, I mean, Calvin Austin was decent last year. Pickens is gone. Fryermuth is solid, but there's room if he's talented and he's going to improve. They'll be able to find him the ball. So, he's solid. Tight end room is rated ninth on Keep Trade Cut. It's led by Jake Ferguson for Dallas, who I think will have a solid year. Did not have a great year last year, obviously, with Dak missing a lot of time and the team just not being very good. It wasn't ideal for him, but he was tight end 8 the year before. So I think that's an offense that should be better. Obviously, they bring in Pickens, who might, he projects to take a lot of targets. I mean, CD and Pickens are going to be the guys that move the chains. But if it's a better offense, he becomes more of an option in the red zone. Didn't score any touchdowns last year versus 5 the year prior. Hopefully he stays healthy. Hopefully Dak stays healthy. He's in a contract year, I believe. Yeah, 1 year left on his rookie contract. So he should be more motivated than ever to have a great season. Theo Johnson emerged last year a little bit. He did, I believe he got hurt down the stretch. Yeah, with a foot. But there for a while, it looked like he was carving out a decent role. He caught anywhere from 3 to 5 passes from week 5 all the way through week 13, where he got hurt. Only 1 touchdown. Wasn't a great offense. Russell Wilson should help stabilize that offense a little bit. They didn't really add anybody. Obviously, they drafted Jackson Dart. They also brought in Jameis alongside Russ. So the quarterback room should be better than it was last year. Malik Neighbors and Wan'Dale Robinson are both going to see a ton of targets, but there's a chance for Theo Johnson to carve out a role there, in my opinion. And then where are we at here? Zach Ertz had a great season last year. He's getting old. He's 34, but he was a favorite target for Jaden Daniels, and he was big all the way down the stretch into the playoffs. He re-signed on a 1-year deal that could be it's 6.25 mil. It could go all the way up to 9. So Ben Sinnott dealing with so many physical ailments. It seems like it's going to be Zach Ertz's job again this year. He saw 91 targets last year, which is the most he'd seen since 2021. Caught 66 passes, which is the most he caught since 2021. 654 yards, most since 2021. 7 touchdowns, most since 2018 when he was back with Philly. So very reliable option. He's a bit of a safety valve for young stud quarterback Jaden Daniels, and he should be just fine. And then Cade Otton as well. So, and Hunter Henry, I didn't even see him. Hunter Henry, we kind of know what he is. He should see quite a bit of targets. He saw 97 this past year. He's solid. He's not a game breaker, but he's reliable. He's a guy you can play pretty much any given week. And, he should get you 4 or 5 points. And then if he scores a touchdown, then it was a great week. So draft picks, they've got him ranked 10th. He's got only a 1 this year. He's missing his 2 and 3. 2027, he's got a 1 and a 3. And then 2028, he has everything. So missing a few pieces there, but he's still got all 3 of his 1. So he's got plenty of ammo if he wants to make any sort of a move. So, that's the Halas division. Legendary coach, player coach, executive manager, everything he was. Seems like a very, very talented division from top to bottom. I really don't know who I think will win it. For reference, I voted Taylor to win the Shula division. I guess I was his 1 vote, unless 3 more people have voted since I looked earlier at the start of this. I don't currently know who I will vote for the Halas division, but same thing. I'll post a poll in the chat. By the time you've read this, it will have been in there or by the time you've listened to this, it will have been in the chat for quite a while. I'll post a poll and you just vote for who you think is going to win. So again, thank you for listening to episode 3 of the TDL podcast. We got one more of these divisional deep dives. And then after that, I don't have much planned. There's not much else to talk about until the season starts. So I'd love to have guests on because that will make things flow. So you guys don't have to listen to me talk so much. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.